Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the EUI degree conferring ceremony for the Department of Economics and the Department of Law. Before we start, may I kindly ask you to make sure your cell phones are switched off. Headsets have been placed on your chair. While there is no translation, it can improve your hearing. I'm very pleased to now give the floor to EUI President Professor Renaud de Hoos for his welcome address.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see so many of you around here. I mean, last year's ceremony was much more intimate. And as everybody knows, 2 years ago it was cancelled. So this is a good sign of the revival of our activity, which we all very welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, dear graduates, this is of course a special day. Needless to say, first and foremost, for all of you, who will see in a few moments the crowning of years of patient efforts, probably the most ambitious project to date, at least, in your existence. It's also a special day for your family, who had to accept your exile and has supported you throughout this period. But allow me to say so, it's also an important day for us, for the Institute too. For any educational institution, there is no greater satisfaction than the achievements of its students. We are well placed to appreciate what it takes to get where you got. At the same time, a university is not merely a knowledge center where your intellect is stimulated by instructors. Of course, it is that, hopefully. But equally importantly, it is a community where you can learn from all sorts of people, in all sorts of encounters, many of which have little to do with academic issues. This is, of course, particularly true about this very place because of the large diversity which there is in the EUI community. For many of us, a substantial share of our social life takes place within this community. That's, of course, why the lockdown phases we've gone through have been so painful, particularly for the researchers' community. The EUI experience is not merely an important stage in our intellectual training or an important professional moment. It's also a rich experience on the human plane. That is why I feel authorized to insist on one point. In a few moments, you will get your degree and you will prepare to leave the Institute. But I insist, this notwithstanding, you do remain members of the EUI community. We will stay in touch with you and follow the development of your careers. We will always be happy to see you return, be it for the State of the Union, for a workshop, or even for the Coppa Pavone, for that matter. But equally importantly, because you remain a member of the EUI community, let me ask you for your help in developing further our institute. We need to help it to adjust to an ever-changing world. You have a role to play in that process. Be our ambassadors in two ways. wherever you will be, share any ideas that you may have that could inform tomorrow's project that we might wish to undertake. And equally importantly, send us more good people like you, because this is crucial for our activity. That is my wish, but I should stop here and simply say that we wish you all the best in your future careers, or to use the local language, in bocca al lupo, and see you soon. Thank you.
We will now proceed with the awarding of the Doctor Honoris Causa degree to Professor Mahdi Koskeniemi. I invite Honorary Promoters Professor Nia Jain and Professor Sarah Naun to address the Honorary Doctor Mahdi Koskeniemi.
Which one?
It is customary at the EUI for the laudatio to be given by one professor.
But the EUI is an international organization. International organizations are governed by international law, and international rules contain their own exceptions. This is one of the fundamental insights of Martti Koskiniemi's groundbreaking From Apology to Utopia, the structure of international legal argument.
Koskiniemi had served for several years as a diplomat in the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, negotiating, among others, the monumental United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and representing Finland before the International Court of Justice. When just on the side, in 1989, he found the time to publish a PhD thesis that fundamentally changed the field's understanding of what it meant to do international law. After From Apology to Utopia, international lawyers could no longer hide behind pragmatic doctrinalism. Koskiniemi showed how their professional discourse was intrinsically connected with social and political assumptions about the character of the present world.
I still remember the day when, after 6 years of studying law in the Netherlands, I was taken apart by one law professor. As if trading in an illegal substance, he handed me a book. Read this book, and international law will never be the same again. Thankfully, the book did not remain a secret. Fatu, as the book became popularly known, was generally recognized as a game changer in dozens of reviews.
But one of the responses was that the argument felt perhaps a bit too structural. Didn't individuals matter? And that gauntlet led to Koskiniemi's next book, The Gentle Civilizer of Nations, The Rise and Fall of International Law, 1870 to 1960. Through a virtuosic combining of epochs, ideas, sources, languages, and biographies, The Gentle Civilizer charts the intellectual history of international law through a focus on its principal authors.
Breaking through the boundaries of conventional academic disciplines, whilst arguing against interdisciplinarity, Koskiniemi's elegant narrative was more than field-defining. It was field-generative. Catalyzing what is now known as the historical turn in international law, Koskiniemi's Gentle Civilizer paved the way for a whole new area of international legal research.
Well, some of the responses to the book fell into the category of, wait a minute, our national international law heroes from the same period are also worthy of attention. But that critique mostly took care of itself. Italian international lawyers started writing on their own gentle civilizers.
Dutch international lawyers on their own less gentle civilizers.
But a more sustained question was, why did Koskiniemi's account of the rise of international law start only in 1870? What about Victoria, Grotius, and Vattel, theories of the just war, and the Peace of Westphalia? That question Koskenniemi decided to tackle himself.
Wait a second, we're not there yet. It would take another 20 years for him to provide the 1,000-page answer. And it is not that he did not publish anything in between.
Indeed, we haven't even mentioned his classic letter to the editors of a symposium on methods in international law, arguing that critical legal studies and other approaches are not just like products that one can take off the shelf of a shopping mall.
Or the article on how international criminal law is always caught between impunity and show trials.
Or between commitment and cynicism, outline for the theory of international law as practice.
Or the lady doth protest too much on how lawyers claimed the right to decide not just on legality, but also on the legitimacy of the Kosovo crisis.
Or the Cambridge Companion to International Law.
Or his report as chair of the International Law Commission Study Group on Fragmentation, probably the crispiest report in the history of the International Law Commission.
Or to enable an enchant on the power of law.
Or on Eurocentrism and international law.
And this critique of the assumption of European superiority comes from somebody who's deeply immersed in what European traditions have to offer. For instance, when bringing social and critical theory into his work, Koskenniemi draws on literature in
German,
French,
Swedish,
Finnish,
Spanish,
Italian.
English.
We really should stop, because we've only been given 10 minutes.
But we cannot avoid the politics of international law, a central theme of many of his articles. In 1990, Koskenniemi, then still at the Finnish mission to the United Nations, opened the very first issue of the very first volume of the European Journal of International Law. It is with reference to this historical fact that EJIL editor-in-chief and former EUI president Joseph Weiler likes to say that EJIL has always published young and rising stars.
Koskenniemi opened EJIL with an article titled "The Politics of International Law," what was then a shocking message for most European international lawyers. 30 years later, Koskenniemi's message has become almost mainstream.
Although not necessarily understood. Today, what would probably be considered more shocking is the overall table of contents of that very first issue of EJIL. It included the great and the good, with at the end of the issue an article by a certain EUI professor, Renaud de Hoes, yet another confirmation of Weiler's claim. Currently more shocking is that the 28 articles in between Koskenniemi and de Hoes's were also all authored by men.
20 years later, Koskenniemi revisits the topic of politics in the same journal, now explaining the politics of fragmentation. And 30 years later, he returns to the topic one last time.
In his collection of essays titled The Politics of International Law, Koskenniemi uses Wittgenstein's famous duck-rabbit image to summarize the relationship between law and politics. Just as it would make no sense to ask whether the image is really a duck or a rabbit, Koskenniemi argued that it is equally pointless to ask whether something is really law or really politics. What one sees depends on one's background assumptions, cognitive biases, and institutional vocabulary.
The haloed halls of international law, such as the International Court of Justice, according to Koskenniemi, were filled with duck-like jurists speaking duckalese. A lawyer trying to make her argument before ducks, but speaking like a rabbit, would simply lose her case. The lesson, to put it in Koskenniemi's inevitable words, is when with ducks, speak like ducks.
And when with rabbits, speak rabbit.
So what is Koskenniemi's own language? Does he exemplify his own theory, set forth in his most recent magnum opus, To the Uttermost Ends of the Earth, Legal Imagination and International Power, 1300 to 1870, according to which international legal practice is a form of bricolage.
Bricoleurs pick up and put together idioms, vocabularies, and concepts from their professional and cultural surroundings, and combine them, both following tradition and exercising imagination, in order to persuade audiences.
But Koskenniemi's own theory does not actually do him enough justice, for he's not merely someone who arranges and rearranges elements to generate brilliantly unexpected results, but his work is more true to the roots of the word bricolage in the noun bricole, meaning catapult.
The Koskenniemi catapult has opened research avenues that used to be locked. He also used it to launch the academic careers of dozens of more junior scholars, men and women alike. Whilst writing thousands of pages, he always made time for younger generations to give them feedback on their projects, as he did once again this morning.
I remember reading a review of Italo Calvino's work, reminding readers that he first had to see and say what we now take for granted. Much the same could be said of Martti Koskieniemi, who has morphed from a noun into an adjective for aspiring international lawyers everywhere pursuing their own Koskieniemi-esque projects in international law.
No doubt a prospect that Koskieniemi would regard with his trademark wry humor, given that he has staunchly resisted all labels and has managed to escape from all the boxes that commentators try to cabin him in.
Just like he would resist, I'm sure, the sobriquet, the leading international lawyer of his generation.
But let's see whether he resists the following.
We present Martti Koskieniemi for admission to the honorary degree of Doctorate of the European University Institute.
I'll start as soon as I stop crying. What an honor it is to receive an honorary doctorate here in Florence. What delight it is to receive it with such an introduction by Sarah and Niha. It's always pleasurable to come back to Florence. It has never been quite like this. I've, of course, had many students and many colleagues here, doing brilliant work of which I've learned so much. I've participated in a number of activities launched by this institution. The European Journal was already mentioned, the European Society, at the first meeting of which I gave a talk on whatever else than the European tradition. Now, there are moments, of course, and I suppose you share this, when one gets tired of celebratory focus on Europe and ideas of purportedly European origin. One of the great merits of this institution has been its critical focus on Europe's bright and its dark sides, and its commitment to doing this from the perspective of many different knowledges: law, social science, economics, international relations, anthropology, linguistics, and so on. The European story is a complex story, and it needs a complex set of knowledges and disciplines and attitudes to make justice to it. Also, it makes it possible to study European power in a realistic way. In the study of that power, if one speaks historically, Florence, of course, plays a significant role. I'm thinking of Machiavelli's complex analysis of rulership over lo Stato and Guicciardini's history of Italy. Both left posterity a lesson, an Italian lesson, the lesson of imperial intervention in northern Italy in 1494 that destroyed the intricate system of balance of power that Lorenzo di Medici had so carefully constructed, a system that then became the epitome of what in the 18th century was called European public law and has become the diplomatic system, or that as we know it today. But statehood and diplomacy are not the only European institutions that aim towards worldwide scope. Equally important have been civil society practices, especially the economic relations that expanded beyond Europe at the very moment when Machiavelli and Guicciardini were composing their treatises. Florentine thinkers were deliberating about state power, but Europe has much to account for it. Its introduction of two forms of power, rulership, yes, of the state, but also the system of economic transactions that has spread across the world. It is precisely the transdisciplinary, or as I like to think of it, counterdisciplinary character of much of the work that you, doctors to be, have done here that enables a much better understanding of both of these forms of power, their bright and their dark sides. With a doctoral degree from this institution, you will join an elite rank of experts to manage that power. Perhaps you will do that from some institution in the European Union. But now, whatever else being an expert might mean, at least it involves internalizing the mindset that specialists in a particular field tend to possess. Economic experts, lawyers, sociologists, international relations scholars all possess their idiosyncratic outlook on the world, their typical sense of what are the most important problems and what should be done with them. A lawyer opening the window to the world sees all kinds of illegality and contemplates constitutional solutions. A sociologist sees root causes and statistical tendencies, while an economist extrapolates from them the next quarter's growth, as well as the appropriate interest levels to manage them. The worlds are both the same and different. Ducks and rabbits. This is not some kind of misformation, but the essence of being a duck or a rabbit, that is to say, an expert. That's not an unproblematic position in which to be. As we have recently witnessed, not only in Europe, political conflict has tended to become a conflict between forms of expert knowledge, between the knowledge of the environmental expert and the trade expert, a human rights specialist and a security specialist. The proposals of institutional reform put forward by economists tend to be very different from those put forward by sociologists, but strangely in a predictable way. And yet, as experts, each bases their authority on the truth of what they say. In such politics, a politics of necessity, the rest tend to become and feel alienated. When experts clash, the rest interpret the clash as really a political dispute, so that the expertise presents itself only as a bias. Expert politics sometimes seems like an updating of the Machiavellian matrix. In the past, conflict was about clash of nations. Now it often seems a conflict between expert regimes. But the politics of nations was never a clash of black boxes. Nations consist of many contradicting ideas and groupings. If European integration is to flourish, this will have to be by looking closely into the social, economic, and legal world of individual European nations. And this is what you and I have been doing. Now is the time to do the same to the forms of expertise we have acquired. Expertise, you see, is also not a black box. For every orthodoxy, there is a heterodox challenger. Some of those challenges will become tomorrow's orthodoxies and be soon challenged as such. This is the world in which we will participate. To realize that the expert knowledges are already divided against themselves, it's useful to be trained in many types of specialism, as we do here. I do not think as transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity, as I already said. These tend often only to strengthen our disciplinary identities. At least I never experienced myself as a lawyer more than in the group of economists and sociologists. So I put forward and imagine a counterdisciplinarity that is alert to the wisdom of the amateur and the partiality of what it is that one does when one does it the best way that one can. And how can that counterdisciplinarity become real? Well, one place in which to start would be to take note of this year's Oxfam report, according to which some 260 million more people will crash into poverty this very year as the number of billionaires will increase by the dozens. The world, the report suggests, is becoming increasingly unjust, unequal. This world, a world of experts. But nothing can be done without experts either, which is the reason why we have academic institutions to reflect upon and develop better, more self-critical types of knowledge to reflect upon ideal futures in contrast to present practices. We speak of scientific revolutions. That word, revolution, plays an important role in our faculties and departments, reminding us that the point of our work is not to prepare for the next research assessment exercise, but that something very large is needed for the world of humans to begin to flourish. Congratulations and thank you.
Professor Koskeniemi, by the authority vested in me, I admit you to the honorary degree of Doctor of the European University Institute. My congratulations. Great pleasure.
The contribution of the EUI choir to the conferring ceremony has become a fine tradition. I'm thus very pleased to welcome the EUI choir and its director, Valerio Del Piccolo, to our event. The pieces they have chosen are the following: La Biche from Six Chansons from Paul Hindemith, O du stille Zeit from César Bresken, Verger from Six Chansons, also from Paul Hindemith, and Abschied vom Walde from Felix Mendelssohn. Thank you very much for this excellent performance. We will now proceed with the award of the doctoral degrees. We will start with the degrees in economics. May I please ask the Echo Gradients to stand up.
By the authority vested in me, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Economics. Congratulations.
I will now, individually, one by one, call the graduates of ECHO to come forward. David Jesus Andrés Cerezo. Daniele Angelini. Annika Bacher. Rafael Ribeiro Barbosa. Alika Ida Bonk. Nikolai Brobert. Giulia Caprini. Flavia Cavallini. Agnès Charpin. Matteo Escudé. Johannes Jakob Fischer. Philip Grubenot. Nur Fatima Jandarova. Mustafa Kaba. Hanno Kasi. Magina Korman-Galiva. Carolina López Quiles Centeno. Yoyos Manalis. David Martinez de la Fuente. Carol Mazur. Christian Johannes Meyer. Ana Moreno Maldonado. Gorgio Moczowski. Sebastian Rast. Johanna Luise Reuter. Anna Rogantini Pico. Matthias Rottner. Chiara Sant'Antonio. Chima Simpson Bell. Simon Skipka. Jan Karol Terecinski. Egon Tripodi. We will now proceed with the award of the doctoral degree in law. May I please ask the law graduates to stand up?
By the authority vested in me, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Laws. Congratulations.
I will now, individually, one by one, call the graduates of the PhD in law to come forward. Birgit Asa. Marcin Baranski. Maria Ana Alexandre Oliveira Costa. Kayahan Chanteki. Olga Tseran. Martin Lolle Christensen. Sabrina D'Andrea. Elias Raphael Kaspar Deutscher. Leticia Diaz Sanchez. Nikita Difisenko. Sophie Alix Claudia Duroy de Sauduron. Fabrizio Esposito. Leonhard Feld. Theo Fournier. Ursula Furgal. Oliver Garner. Maria Haag. Timothy Craig Jacob Owens. Zeynep Koçak Şimşek. Arpita Upendra Kudiveri. Lene Christine Korscheberg. Halena Kostjufevic. Michal Krajewski. Gonzalo Larea. Ruta Liepina. Lucia López Zurita. Sabine Meyer. Stavros Makris. Bartosz Krzysztof Maszyaniak. Thibaut Pierre Ghislain Martinelli. Margherita Melillo. Alice Noguier. Ana Elżbieta Nowak-Sales. Ehinsa Palacín Mariscal. Stavros Evdokimos Pantazapoulos. Chloé Papazian. Virginia Pasalacqua. Maria Patrin. Prometheas Perides. Marie-Catherine Petersman. Christy Anne Petit. Evgenia Rally. Pilvi Tulyaramma. Rebecca Ravalli. Ricardo Felipe Rodrigues de Oliveira. Alejandra Vicente Ruiz Fis. Julian Scholtes. Maya Titberice. Rodrigo Javier Vallejo Garretón. Dimitri van der Merse. Katarzyna Wasińska-Fink. Pauline Margarete Sophie Weller. Rebecca Williams. Raphael Xenidis. Michaela Giatru. We will now proceed with the awards of the Master in Comparative European and International Laws. May I please ask the LLM graduates to stand up.
By the authority vested in me, I admit you to the degree of Master of Laws. Congratulations.
I will now also, one by one, call the LLM graduates to come forward. Larissa Bama. Felix Jonathan Janusek. Vendela Sophia Christina Rupp. Juliette Neal-Ura. We will now proceed with the announcing of the awards of the Vilfredo Pareto Prize, the Mauro Capelletti Prizes 2021 and 2022, and the Antonio Cassesi Prize. I kindly invite and ask the Dean of Graduate Studies, Professor Deirdre Curtin, to address the prize winners.
So, it's been a long sit for everyone, but as the Dean of Graduate Studies of all doctoral researchers, I'd like to say something briefly to all of the graduates this year. So this year is a bit of a misnomer. You are quite the mixed up cohort. You span from basically those who defended their thesis in 2019, right up to those who only defended in the past few days, even day, I think, or weeks. We know the reasons. Last October, we had a physical ceremony, but only 44 graduates in total participated, and not a single economist. The economists are thankfully back in force this year, but with overall approximately double the registrations we normally have, there was no choice but to split up the 4 departments. No matter, it's fair to say that the experience of those of you who defended in 2019, those of you who defended in 2020, 2021, or in 2022, have been all quite different, much more so than normally would have been the case. One thing for sure is that it has not been easy, and no matter what the struggles were, and they were not all pandemic related, you have emerged victorious. Your cherished doctoral diploma or degree now in your hands and on your record forevermore. But before we soon get to the well-deserved celebration afterwards, let me share a quote from one of you from the first ever exit survey conducted among all those who defended between September 2020 and August 2021. So that's quite a lot of you, I think. And the core of the EUI was idealistically expressed by you as follows, and I quote, "The EUI is the place for the community. People after the EUI program are the best ambassadors of the idea of community. At the EUI, the spirit of the community is the most important value. Everything else people are able to organize. This spirit is created by the relation, and these are your words, between academic service, departments, and researchers. Places like Bar Fiasco, Coppa Pavona, but all the other activities are absolutely crucial to create these levels of relations." It's the end of the quote. And of course, there were also there were points of criticism, even on the wording of the survey, I think, by the economists. But, no, they're noted. In our context today, it's good to remind ourselves of this relatively accessible spirit of community. But when I was reflecting earlier this week what the common denominator was and is of all the 8 prize winners we celebrate today, not all right now, 3 of them were in the earlier session, I was reminded more of the value of courage and how that permeates who we are and aspire to be as scholars. As the late poet Maya Angelou put it, and I quote, "Courage is the most important of the virtues, because without it, no other virtue can be practiced consistently." Our special prize winners today have displayed courage that has marked them out in their academic choices and paths. This, for me, is the stellar commonality they share, and I hope we all share. They have, in any event, cultivated courage in their time here at the EUI and with brilliant results and outreach to wider communities beyond the EUI. So it's my pleasure to now introduce the prize winners. So what I'm going to do is do it by economics and then law, and ask you to stand up, and then I will address you, and then you will come forward. Okay, so we just do it like that. So the Vilfredo Pareto Prize is for the best doctoral thesis in economics. And this is actually the broadest of all the prizes we have, and it's no small achievement to be awarded it by your department. So I would ask to stand up, and then I'll address you, Annika Bacher and Giulia Caprini, please. Both of you are. We'll do it again in a moment. Annika Bacher, your area is quantitative macroeconomics, and within that field, you focused on a field that affects many, household finance. Does marital status affect households' investment choices? Is accounting for distinct family types necessary for the correct evaluation of policies that aim at stimulating housing demand? To answer these substantial questions, you developed a life cycle model of housing and financial portfolio choices with dynamic and heterogeneous family types. The economics department, in its citation, and I quote, is impressed by the quality and insights of the thesis. You already have international recognition and will start as assistant professor in Norway at the University of Oslo in the autumn. Please come forward to accept your prize. Okay, Julia Caprini, you are an applied microeconomist. These are not my words, they're yours, because I looked up your site. Your job market paper, crucial for graduating economists, I have learned, is called Visual Bias, and already got a Best Paper Award for 2021-2022 Econ Job Market. You constructed a visual vocabulary of graphic features and applied a dictionary-based method to build measures of visual language polarization of recent US news. This sounds and is highly innovative, visual, resourceful, and also practical. And the department found your work across all your papers excellent. In September 2022, you will join Nuffield College at Oxford University as a prize postdoctoral fellow, and you're in fact the second of only 3 annually, I believe, as the SPS prize winner in the earlier ceremony also achieved this prize and will join you there in the autumn. Please come forward and accept our congratulations. Well done. Okay, now we turn to law, and 3 prizes are present here. So I'd ask you to stand up. Margarita Melillo, Virginia Pasalacqua, and Letizia Diez Sanchez. Margarita, you were awarded the Antonio Casa Prize 2021 for the best thesis in international law. You are ambitious and courageous in your choice of methods, blending, and I quote, a rigorous historical and socio-legal investigation into the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. The panel who judged the prize finds your academic voice, and I quote, pellucid and admirably self-reflective on the many strengths and occasional limitations of your chosen approach. You are now a research fellow in Washington, D.C. at the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law, part of Georgetown University, where you continue your social legal work. So please come forward to accept your prize. Well done. Virginia, you were awarded the Mauro Cappelletti Prize 2021 for the best thesis in comparative in European law. Your interest is on those who mobilize EU migration on behalf of migrants. Your approach is to show law in action, bringing out the various actors from civil society, academia, even the judiciary itself, that were behind the court's rulings. The panel found, and I quote, that you made an original contribution to comparative migration law, explaining legal mobilization in the 3 selected countries and reflecting on the conditions for successful mobilization. You've left Italy for now and are a postdoctoral researcher at the Utrecht Center for Regulation and Enforcement in Europe in the Netherlands. Congratulations, and please come forward. Letizia, you were awarded the 2022 Mauro Cappelletti Prize. You are interested in the way law in Europe interacts with inequality, especially in litigation and judicial decision-making. You sought to unveil the distributive conflicts at the core of the process of integration through law, and to bravely develop an alternative narrative of legal integration that does not focus on the integrationist force of the case law, but instead shows the social conflicts that have driven litigation in the European Union, as well as the winners and losers of those dynamics. In the words of the prize panel, and I quote, "The thesis is highly original in showing the social conflicts and distributive consequences generated by EU law and policies. It is an outstanding piece of research," end of quote. You are now working for the European Ombudsman in Brussels, and I congratulate you, and please come forward. Well done.
I would now like to invite Dr. Philip Grubenot to the pulpit for the salute.
Dear President De Hus, dear professors, dear families and friends, dear colleagues and graduates. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to deliver this year's graduate salute at this conferring ceremony. It is a great joy to see so many of you who've been on this PhD journey with me at this occasion. At the end of the PhD, probably most of us have been looking back to the beginning. When I was applying for PhD programs in the spring of 2016, I did not really know about the EUI. It was purely by chance that one of my professors was an EUI alumnus and encouraged me to apply. His recommendation was to not just consider the academic quality of a program, but also whether I wanted to live and work at a place for 4 or 5 years. After spending just a few hours at the EUI for the interview process, I was already convinced that the institute would be the ideal place in both dimensions. The professors were interested in the applicants, there was a special sense of community among the students, and it was a glorious spring day in April, with the magnolia on the Badia terrace in full blossom. My expectations from that interview day were more than satisfied over the course of the following years. One of the professors who interviewed me is now a co-author, several other applicants I met became close friends, and I have been in awe of the view from the Badia terrace every time I stepped on it. The PhD program at the EUI is no different from others in that it involves a lot of work, but it is an absolute privilege to do that work in the gardens of Villa La Fonte and Villa Salviati. This outer beauty is what many academics around the world immediately associate with the EUI, besides academic excellence. And it is true that all of us will forever fondly remember what the EUI, Florence and Tuscany have to offer next to long work days, from extended cycling trips through the Tuscan hills, wine tastings in Chianti, and sightseeing in Florence with visiting family and friends, to long evenings in Bar Fiasco and at the pitch of Villa Schifanoia for Coppa Pavone. Still, it is not the scenery that makes the EUI a truly special place. What makes the EUI extraordinary is the ease with which you immediately feel at home as part of a family. It is what distinguishes the Institute most sharply from all other universities I know of. After finishing the first year of the PhD, there was no one in Villa La Fonte that I did not know by name, from students and fellows to professors and staff. I want to take this opportunity to, on behalf of all of us, thank everybody who makes the EUI that special place. The professors at the EUI are exceptional in their dedication to their students. We cannot count the hours and days that our advisors have invested in us. So our heartfelt gratitude goes to all the advisors who kept believing in us, even when there was sometimes little progress. Beyond the professors, I also want to thank the entire staff, from the administration to the canteen, from the gardeners to the porters. All those who keep the place running so that we can focus on our research. You really are at the heart of the institution. Now that we moved on to careers in other places, Now that we moved on to careers in other places around the world, many of us miss being at the EUI. Personally, I'm trying to keep a piece of Florence with me by having the cathedral as my desktop background and drinking my espresso from cups at Florentine cafes. I'm also trying to convince my last remaining co-author to extend his PhD by another year, but I'm not sure whether the EUI can officially endorse even longer economics PhDs. I started by saying that it is good to see so many familiar faces from past years at this conferring ceremony. In part, this is only the case because there could not be a conferring ceremony and a June ball in the last 2 years. So our large gathering today is also an indication of the challenging times societies worldwide have faced over the past years. While the pandemic has of course inflicted much greater suffering worldwide, it has also been a challenging period for an institution that lives from openness and interaction. The EUI had to close for an extended period of time, and we were confined to our homes. Borders between European countries were closed, something previously unimaginable for our generation. Some of us were separated from our families and friends at home for extended periods of time. This came on top of the challenge of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. In this challenging world, in which new barriers are erected, I believe that the EUI has a more important role than ever to play. Robert Schuman, French Foreign Minister, founding father of the European Union and namesake of the Schuman Center for Advanced Studies at the EUI, once said, "Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first created a fact of solidarity." I believe the EUI can play a big role in creating such a solidarity. It not just produces ideas for the further development of Europe, but also creates strong bonds between people from all its member states. My cohort at the EUI included students from most European countries and around the world, many of whom have become close friends. The time we were allowed to spend together in the beautiful EUI environment creates a responsibility to stand up against any new barriers being erected and threatening to bring us apart. I will borrow some advice from former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, which she gave to graduates in her commencement speech at Harvard in 2019. Tear down walls of ignorance and narrow-mindedness, for nothing has to stay as it is. Take joint action in the interests of a multilateral global world. Don't forget that freedom is never something that can be taken for granted. I believe that this summarizes well the values that the EUI has instilled in all of us. It has been a challenging couple of years for the Institute and for many of us in the last stages of writing the thesis. However, I'm very happy that this allows us to celebrate what I believe has to be the largest June ball in the history of the EUI. I don't want to keep you any longer from the well-deserved celebrations. Congratulations to all, and thank you.
The ceremony has come to an end. According to our tradition, the graduates, together with the president, will be the first to leave the church and have photos taken on the stairs to the church entrance. I therefore ask the audience to remain seated until the photographs have been taken. Please leave your headsets on your seats, and please leave your seats one row at a time to avoid crowding and keep a safety distance. You're kindly invited to the reception that will take place on the church square.